All right, so what I'm going to do here is a series of videos where I'm talking about with a student about how to take a piece where they've taken it to a certain level, and then my comments and feedback on how to kind of point out some good things, point out some things that can be taken further in order to refine an image. And the feedback part is so important, so critical in an artist's development, because it gives you this kind of standard to push you forward and maybe point out some things that are not quite seen yet, and you really need to have it on your work. That kind of feedback, and I've definitely benefited from it in my days in school, and also with friends, getting some feedback. So that's what we're doing here, and hope to do more of them. Okay, so having said that, we have here the image of the still life, and so this is a charcoal drawing, and what I'm going to go through is point out some things that are working great first. So here we have this lighter onion and the tomato in front of it. You can see that the set of values here are separating well from the set of values here in the tomato, so that you can feel that one is is different than the other. And that kind of thing is really important as you're trying to develop a good value pattern. Now, it has a nice dramatic sense of light, where you've got this dark background and these nice highlights here. What I'd like to look at is kind of a hierarchy of highlights. Where are the major lights, and are they being hit to a degree that lets the other ones fall off to have just a little less importance? So as I look here, and what I'm asking myself initially, so where's the the major highlight? So let's say one of them is right here. That's one that really jumps out, but also right here on the tomato. Okay, and I would say all other highlights kind of fall back from here and here. Now, one thing that distinguishes this, even though it's smaller, is that it's very sharp, and sharpness comes forward, softness falls back in a still life situation. So and obviously contrast will come forward, less contrast will fall back. So what I would say here, right at the beginning, in these two areas, I would suggest making a little bit more contrast between the value of the surrounding, kind of the local value of the water pitcher, and the local value of the tomato, darkening those two areas a little bit more so that these highlights pop out even more. Now, the other thing I would suggest is right here in this part of the highlight, I would make it a little bit sharper, a little bit crisper contrast. Now, when I say it's not razor sharp, it's just firm, like a firmer edge here on that highlight will help pop that out a little bit more. Okay. Now, the student here intentionally, soften this area up here, which I think is a good decision. It's a stylistic decision, and that allows less of the eye to come up in this area. So I think the intention is to draw more attention to this area. So by strengthening this just a little bit more, and then focusing a lot more on sharpening the edge here on the tomato, one thing you can do is just drop the value of this area even a little bit more. So there's less contrast between here and here, allowing this to really pop out. And this is an area where that highlight can actually almost have a darker edge around it to help emphasize it and pop it out more. And that's kind of another tool that can be used to get that to be quite sharp. Because what I'm sensing here is there's kind of a your eye is being led here, the towel is leading you over into this area, but I want to have something that really grab your attention and something that really kind of has this a little bit more of a snap, and a sharper edge can do that. Now these sharp edges down here are working great. So you get that nice light and shadow, you know, that's those soft forms is developed really well. Nice crisp shadows down here. So it's definitely working. What we're just talking about is pushing it a little bit further, maybe even into a little more of an extreme in terms of sharpness in these highlights, and that will help emphasize these areas. Okay, so now there's a couple areas what we could soften a little bit more. So right here, we get a nice strong contrast, and that's evident here in the subject. However, you know, if I compare this to here, I think this could be even a little bit stronger. And so right now I'm feeling this is softer, weaker, and that's a little stronger. So in creating a really strong focal point, sometimes you have to diminish some areas that are strong and emphasize some areas that are strong, a little stronger, in order to create that hierarchy. Because that's something that's going to be, you know, that's going to create a strong focal point more than any other thing you can do. Okay, here's another example. So back here, the strength of this highlight may be equal to the highlight right here, and that could be true even on the subject. This highlight here is probably stronger than what we've got here. But what I would suggest is to, since this is further back in space, is to de-emphasize this a little bit and then create a little stronger highlight here. Again, not as strong as this, in order to make this come forward and that sit back in space. Okay, so we're emphasizing maybe this highlight here in this group, and then maybe emphasizing this in this smaller group here, but this entire area still needs to be less emphasized than what we've got here. So that's the trick that happens in not only in still life, but in every kind of subject and painting that we want to make. What we'll have is when we cast light across an area or the subject, everything will be emphasized kind of in a non-discriminate sort of way. What we need to do when we're trying to create a work of art is we're pushing and pulling some of these highlights in order to emphasize certain areas. Okay, so I would suggest this highlight here, knocking that back just a little bit. So a little bit of a tone back there, even this one just a bit, and then like down here, just taking a little bit of a maybe a crosshatch tone across that, just to knock it back. And all this is just an effort to, again, emphasize this area. Now, we have this object that goes from light into shadow here, and I think there's some nice development with that. Nice soft edge going through there. What I would suggest is just down in here in this area is diminishing that contrast a little bit. And you can see that actually happening here. Little less contrast. So you don't want this area value-wise to compete with what's going on in the onion there, right? The other thing that could happen is even across this table, and we're talking just very slight value differences, you know, leaving this area nice and contrasty here. And even though you have a sharp edge, which is great, keep these sharp edges here, but slowly, slightly putting a little bit more tone here in order to de-emphasize this a little bit in its relation to this spot. Okay, so we're kind of adding kind of a gradient, you know, in all these areas, just to de-emphasize and to kind of slowly culminate. So just like a piece of classical music, you culminate into the climax right here, where you have great contrast, you know, enunciated notes, and then these areas back in here are all, you know, de-emphasized. Okay, another thing with the background, I think there's some nice things going on with the softness of it, and also creating maybe a little bit more that the artist saw while observing this than what we, you know, see here in the photo. What I would recommend is we see some of these directional lines going in this direction, which kind of mimic what's going on here. And what I would suggest is some of the line work going across in this direction in order to vary it up just a little bit. And these are just very subtle, slight things, but these things kind of take it from a very nice drawing to something that could be even better. And it's just those little things that kind of help in kind of furthering that cause. Now, as far as the composition, I think for the most part there are some good things going on with the design. It has a nice the subtle curve kind of leading up in here. I think this is beautifully rendered. The dried roots on the onion, I think there's a lot of beautiful touch there. One thing I think with just a spatial relationship here, there is a consideration of space from here to here and then here to here, which is all different. The one concern I would express is that this being so close to the edge, right in this little space, is uncomfortable. I would either say crop it, let it go off the page, which might be a problem because then this gets too close here, or just giving it just a little bit more space so that it feels almost, this is almost a tangent to the edge there. So I think just adding a little bit more space. But if you add a little more space here, then you just need to be careful that it doesn't match kind of the spatial distance right here. So you kind of have to be aware of that when you start expanding the area a little bit. But anyway, something always to be careful with there. So you can see there's, this is something that's really well developed. And there's always, a few little things that could be done here to just, take it a little bit further.